The Bracero program is the largest U.S. labor program to date. From 1942 to 1964, 4.6 million contracts were signed by Mexican workers to temporarily come into the United States. The word Bracero stands for the strong-armed ones. The making for the Bracero program can first be seen in World War II when there were labor shortages in agricultural jobs. By 1951, the U.S. was entering the Korean War, and Congress formalized the Bracero program. However, during this time it was very controversial because the farm workers were worried that the Braceros would take their job and lower their wages. Congress built in safeguards to protect the Mexicans. Some examples of these were guaranteed payment of at least the privileging area wage, employment for 3/4 of the contract, adequate sanitary and free housing, decent meals at responsible prices, occupation insurance at employees' expense, and free transportation back to Mexico at the end of the contract. By 1957, the United States had the largest level of immigration. More than 192,000 workers were in California and 150,000 in the rest of the United States. By 1960, 25% of the seasonal agricultural labor force were from the Bracero program. The majority of farms that used them were larger farms, resulting in 5% of farms in California to employ 60% of the Braceros. The Bracero program was terminated December 1st, 1964. The Braceros made it possible for the U.S. economy to focus on the war rather than worrying about what they had to eat at home.
Now, one thing that was really noted about this time in American history was that even though we saw lots of people entering the United States from Mexico, what we actually ended up seeing is given that we saw a lot of visas being issued at this time, which actually peaked at 450,000 temporary visas to come to the United States in the year 1954, and this bilateral agreement to work together on border enforcement issues, illegal immigration from crossing the border from Mexico to the United States, according to political scientist Richard Craig, in his words, practically ceased to exist. And this, however, is still a very controversial plan for many reasons. Now, according to Kitty Calavita, who is a professor of criminology at the School of Social Ecology at UC Irvine, this period, this Braceros period and this Braceros program, and the term Bracero is synonymous with, quote, substandard wages and living conditions. And the United Agricultural Workers, which is a farm labor union that was headed formerly by Cesar Chavez, has also expressed disapproval for reviving this plan, and it looks at it with a very negative view because they claim that this program was exploitative to workers and weakened unionized farm labor's negotiating power against growers. Now, while this issue, in very many ways, mirrors the classic issue of equality, for instance, for people like Cesar Chavez and people of the UAW, given that they feel that this program was exploitative, versus efficiency because it utilized a way that got around government restrictions on labor and cut the cost of labor for growers, we see that there are supporters looking towards reviving portions of this bill nowadays, particularly within agriculture. Labor costs over the years have very steadily increased since 1990, rising on average about 0.8% yearly according to the USDA, and a plan like this could very well supply badly needed labor in face of these high costs. With that being said, the high rates of illegal immigration and demand on both sides of the border for lower skilled immigration, especially in agriculture, this idea has repeatedly come up since the 90s to stem the flow of the illegal immigration that has come from unilateral enforcement of border issues since the end of this program.
Today's immigration policies, compared to the past, I could say is a lot more difficult. Our H-2A program versus the Bracero program from 40, 50 years ago is much more difficult. If for us to have an adequate labor force, we have to plan ahead. And as a farmer, you can't really plan next year's crop unless you know you can get it harvested. In the old days, it was a lot easier just to have a few steps. You could get an adequate labor force, you knew it was reliable, and it was easy, it was better. The H-2A program is so tied up in bureaucracy right now that it's hard to plan ahead for us. We are chronically short of labor, especially hand labor, when it comes to picking crops like oranges and lettuce and strawberries. We have to fix our immigration policy. As growers, we're not for illegal immigration. We want we want our labor force to be legal because that way we know it's reliable. It's not illegal. Illegal immigration is unreliable. You never know when somebody's going to get caught, sent back, or whatever. But the way the H-2A program is today, it's almost impossible to get adequate labor for California agriculture.
A legal way for agricultural firms in California to use immigrants in the labor force without making them become citizens is the H-2A program. In 1986, the United States created two programs allowing immigrants to enter the U.S. workforce legally without becoming citizens. This was the creation of the H-2A and the H-2B program. H-2A refers to the agricultural workers, and H-2B refers to workers in other industries. In the rest of this report, we will focus on the H-2A. The H-2A guest worker program allows agricultural employees to hire workers from other countries on temporary work permits for jobs that last 10 months or less. To bring H-2A guest workers, employees must first show that they are unable to hire U.S. workers to meet their labor needs. Although the H-2A program includes some basic requirements to protect U.S. workers from both wage reduction and poor working conditions, as well as protecting foreign workers from exploitation, the structure of the program, including the dependence of the H-2A workers on their employers, is inherently flawed and leads to a system that is ripe with abuse of both foreign and domestic workers. In order to hire foreign workers through the H-2A program, employers must obtain a temporary labor certificate from the Department of Labor. To do this, they must demonstrate that the job is of a temporary or seasonal nature and that there are not enough U.S. workers who are able, willing, or qualified to perform the work at the place and time needed. They also need to prove that the wages and working conditions of these domestic workers will not be adversely affected by the importation of guest workers. In practice, the system is incredibly flawed because it often leads to mistreatment of foreign and domestic workers and inflates tensions between these two groups. For example, there was the arson that took place in Nipomo where tensions between locals and immigrants led to some extremists to set fire to a home being built for the immigrant laborers.
So if we bring back the Bracero program, the biggest thing is that these new Mexican laborers that are going to be coming over to help on the farm, they're going to need a place to live. And so here in Santa Maria where I live, they've actually taken old motels like this and they have converted them into farm housing for the laborers. And they did this through the H-2A program. And this is just right here in downtown Santa Maria off of Broadway. And so this is actually one of the biggest benefits because it's actually lowered the crime rate in this neighborhood. And so this is a benefit for everyone because the farmers are getting their labor that they need and the workers have a place to stay and they're safe, and you can see like they're actually, nice rooms that the farms have provided for them. So if we were to implement a new Bracero program, it would have to be similar to the current H-2A program that we have. And what the H-2A program does is it brings Mexican workers from Mexico to America where they stay here while they work. But this is extremely expensive because the farmers who have them work, they have to pay for their housing and for their transportation from the farm back to the housing. And so what a local farmer here in Nipomo tried to do is he wanted to buy several houses like this for his workers. And he wanted to have at least 4 to 16 people stay in each house. However, this community, once they found out that there were going to be up to 16 people staying in these houses, they were not happy with that and they wanted to stop this. And so what actually happened was that when they were building these houses, that they got burned down. And as you can see, there's nothing left here, it's just empty land. And so what this means is we just have to take into account the communities where we're going to have these immigrants living, because in some places they'll have positive effects, like in Santa Maria. However, in other communities where they might not be wanted, like here in Nipomo. And so when trying to come up with new immigration policy, we just have to take in account all factors and just be wary of all communities that are going to be affected.